Welcome to the conspiracy. Just hearing that title, you might immediately think of whispers, shadowy figures, hidden agendas, powerful elites pulling strings behind the scenes. And when it comes to secret societies, one name just dominates the conversation: the Illuminati. It seems like it's everywhere. Discussions online about global events, even pop music videos, Jay-Z, Beyonce, Katy Perry, they're often mentioned. Our mission in this deep dive is to take a stack of sources. We have historical documents, academic analyses, even the media that spreads these modern myths, and really trying to separate fact from fiction. Our goal is to uncover who the Illuminati actually were, how their legends sort of exploded, and why this particular conspiracy theory still captivates millions, making sure you get the real story without information overload. So let's start with the most recognizable symbols, the ones associated with the modern Illuminati. You've probably seen them, right? We're talking about things like pentagrams or maybe goats, but the most famous ones, the all-seeing eye and the pyramid right there in the US dollar bill. What is it about these symbols? Why are they so persistent?
Yeah, it's really interesting how these symbols work today. I mean, our sources suggest that when celebrities use them, artists use them, they're often just, having fun. They're entertained by these stories. It kind of reminds me of that Paul McCartney hoax back in '66.
Right, the Paul is dead thing.
Exactly. He never denied it. And just like Jay-Z or Rihanna today, it just created more buzz. It's almost like playing with the myth. But for millions of other people, these symbols are definitely not playful. They're seen as genuine hidden messages from a shadowy cabal that controls, everything. Wars, the economy, the weather, even, missing planes.
That's a huge gap in perception. Okay, so let's tackle the biggest one then. That Eye of Providence and the pyramid on the US dollar bill. Is it really a secret Freemason or Illuminati symbol? Or is there something else going on?
Yeah. Well, we can pretty much bust this myth decisively based on the sources. The Eye of Providence was actually put on the Great Seal of the United States way back in 1782 by the Founding Fathers. And its meaning was pretty clear then. It symbolized God watching over the new republic. The pyramid represented durability, and the 13 levels stood for the original states.
Okay, so a symbol of divine oversight and the nation's founding.
Exactly. And here's the key thing. This symbol predates the Freemasons adopting it into their own system. They used it later. Plus, it wasn't even put on the dollar bill until 1935. That was President Franklin D. Roosevelt and Henry A. Wallace.
1935. Much later.
Much later. And yes, Roosevelt was a 32nd degree Freemason, but the sources are clear it wasn't added for Masonic reasons. It was meant to evoke Roosevelt's New Deal. The Latin inscription, Novus Ordo Seclorum.
New Order of the Ages.
Right. It was signaling a new era for America after the Depression. More about national purpose, less about secret societies.
So the dollar bill connection is basically a misunderstanding, tied more to American history and ideals than some hidden group. But what about other rumored hidden Masonic symbols? People talk about the layout of Washington, D.C., or even symbols inside the Vatican. Are those also just misinterpretations?
Well, it's definitely true that many Founding Fathers were Freemasons, George Washington, for example, and he actually performed Masonic cornerstone-laying ceremonies for the Capitol building very openly. He even wore his Masonic apron. It was about creating public ceremony, a sense of the sacred for the new republic.
So visible, not hidden.
Exactly. It was an expression of their values, not some secret code. Our sources confirm the city's layout itself doesn't really contain a hidden Masonic message. And as for the Vatican, that idea about the obelisk in St. Peter's Square being Masonic, that's debunked too. It's actually a 4,000-year-old Egyptian relic the Romans brought over. However, there is one interesting detail concerning the statue of Giuseppe Garibaldi on Janiculum Hill in Rome. Garibaldi was a Grand Mason, the father of Italian independence, and he famously hated priests.
Right.
That statue was a deliberate Masonic message aimed at the Catholic Church. It was originally positioned to stare right at the Holy See.
Wow.
Yeah. They turned it around later, in 1929, after things cooled down a bit. So the point is, much of what we see now as sneaky or secret was actually, back then, Freemasons proclaiming their pride in their Enlightenment values. They weren't hiding. They were, in a way, celebrating.
That's a fascinating way to look at it. Proclamation, not concealment. Okay, let's unpack this more. If the modern Illuminati idea is so caught up in myth and misinterpretation, what was the actual historical group? Where did this all start? Let's talk about Adam Weishaupt.
Right, Johann Adam Weishaupt. He was born in Ingolstadt, Bavaria in 1748. He was a German philosopher, became a professor of civil law and then later canon law at the University of Ingolstadt. His godfather influenced him with rationalist ideas, But ironically, it was his Jesuit education that really seemed to fuel his strong anti-clerical views, which kind of led him down this path.
So May 1st, 1776 rolls around, and this law professor starts a secret society. What was he really trying to achieve? What were his intentions?
He founded the Bavarian Illuminati on May 1st, 1776, and that date itself is interesting, associated with ancient fertility festivals, Walpurgis Night.
Right, kind of evocative.
Definitely. Their name came from the Latin illuminatus, meaning enlightened. Weishaupt himself used the alias Brother Spartacus. And their stated goals were, pretty radical for the time. They wanted to oppose superstition, religious influence over life, abuses of state power, basically liberate humans from religious dogma, undermine corrupt governments, foster rationalism, promote ideas of equality and freedom. Tony Page, one scholar, assessed Weishaupt's project as fundamentally utopian and naively optimistic. The aim was to inculcate virtue, philanthropy, social justice, and morality. It really wasn't intended as something evil or violent, according to these sources.
Okay, so noble aims on the surface, rationalism, fighting corruption. But they were a secret society with a structure that sounds, well, intense.
Oh, absolutely. It was described as an elaborate network of spies and counter-spies. Isolated cells reporting up to superiors they didn't even know.
Whoa.
Weishaupt saw this structure, this secrecy, as a way to make use of this human foible, the love of secrets and belonging, for a real and worthy goal, for the benefit of people.
Using human nature against itself, almost.
Sort of, yeah. Their emblem was the Owl of Minerva, symbol of wisdom. Members used classical code names. Novices, when they joined, were under the complete control of their recruiter, their insinuator. They were told to have no secrets from this person.
Complete control. How did Freemasonry fit into Weishaupt's plan then? Was it supposed to be a partnership, or was it more like a takeover?
It was definitely more of a calculated takeover strategy. Weishaupt joined a Masonic lodge in 1777, but not because he believed in Freemasonry. No, his stated goal was to recruit for his own quasi-Masonic society. He wanted to make use of this human weakness, as he saw it, for his own ends.
Use their structure.
Exactly. He explicitly aimed to infiltrate Freemasonry, turn the lodges into vehicles for Illuminati propaganda and expansion. Another figure, Adolf Freiherrnig, was really key in organizing the rituals and expanding the order, and they were quite successful for a time. They recruited many from the professional classes, even some powerful benefactors. Literary figures, too, like Johann Wolfgang von Goethe was apparently a member. They saw Freemasonry as this ready-made network just waiting to be tapped.
Okay, but this talk of perfecting human nature and re-education, especially under such strict control, how did that square with the Enlightenment ideal of free thought? It feels like a real contradiction.
It absolutely was a contradiction, and a major one. Sources point out that despite its Enlightenment rhetoric, the order prescribed in great detail everything which the members had obediently to read and think.
Wow.
Yeah. Dr. Wolfgang Riedel, another scholar, commented that this approach essentially constituted a degradation and twisting of the Kantian principle of enlightenment. Kant's whole idea was daring to make use of his own reason without the guidance of another.
Think for yourself.
Precisely. So this enlightenment under strict guidance was the exact opposite. It turned intellectual liberation into, well, a different kind of intellectual control. It was ironic, really.
So a group with these grand, maybe naive ideals, but using highly controlling, almost manipulative methods, what ultimately brought them down? They didn't last very long, historically speaking.
No, their decline was incredibly fast, and it was largely due to their own secrecy backfiring, plus members just not being very discreet. The Bavarian government, under Duke Karl Theodor, banned the Illuminati multiple times, 1784, 1785, 1787, 1790.
Repeatedly.
Yes. This happened after they intercepted some of the order's writings, which were interpreted as seditious. And frankly, members' own indiscretions and politically dangerous boasts kind of blew their cover. It became common knowledge they existed.
So much for a secret society.
Right. Weishaupt had to flee Bavaria. The government seized a load of their internal documents and actually published them, exposing everything. After that, the historical Bavarian Illuminati just faded into irrelevance and left really no enduring traces of influence. They became basically a historical footnote.
That's incredible. So a defunct 18th century group, a footnote. Okay, here's where it gets really interesting for me. How did that group, which basically disappeared, somehow become the foundation for the massive, sprawling, global conspiracy theories we hear about constantly today. How did that jump happen?
Well, the initial revival of the myth really kicked off shortly after the dissolved. You can trace it to two main figures around the late 1790s. One was Augustin Birrell, a Jesuit priest exiled from France during the Revolution. The other was John Robison, a Scottish academic.
Oh, yeah.
Between 1797 and 1798, they both published these incredibly popular books, and they claimed the Illuminati hadn't really disappeared. They argued the Illuminati had survived underground and were secretly behind major events, especially the French Revolution.
Blaming the revolution on a secret society. Convenient.
Very convenient for counter-revolutionaries. Beryl even speculated about this huge plot involving Jews, Freemasons, and the Illuminati aiming to demolish all monarchies plus the Vatican. These books caused widespread panic, genuinely influenced political discourse, even impacted the 1800 U.S. presidential election. It was powerful anti-revolutionary propaganda, essentially framing upheaval as the work of a hidden hand.
So that laid the groundwork, kept the name alive in this sinister context. But the modern obsession, the stuff with celebrities and lizard people, that seems to come from somewhere much more recent and, well, frankly, bizarre.
It does, and it's maybe the most surprising part of the story. The real pivot point for the modern myth seems to be the Discordian movement, which started around 1965.
Discordianism.
Yeah, it was this counterculture phenomenon. Their founding text was the Principia Discordia. Their whole philosophy kind of promoted chaos as good, and they actively tried to spread mischief and disinformation as a form of social commentary, almost performance art. And this was taken to a whole new level by the American writer Robert Anton Wilson and his friend Robert Shea. They wrote the science fiction series, the Illuminatus trilogy.
So wait, they basically took this old conspiracy theory and turned it into, like, a prank, blending fact and fiction on purpose.
That's exactly what they did. Wilson and Shea deliberately set out to spread misinformation about the Illuminati. They sent letters, supposedly from imaginary readers, to mainstream magazines, to sci-fi fanzines, mixing real history, the Burrell-Robeson stuff, and just completely invented nonsense. Their stated goal was to make you, the reader, question that, interrogate it, ask, are they really real? It was a game to mess with perception.
Wow.
In their fiction, they blamed everything on the Illuminati, JFK's assassination, you name it. There was even this really oddest theory they floated about Adam Weishaupt secretly assassinating George Washington and taking his place.
No.
Yeah, pointing to the portrait on the dollar bill as supposed proof. And because they mixed it with some real historical tidbits, it gained traction. The Illuminatus trilogy became this huge cult classic, and these deliberately confusing, often satirical ideas just spread like wildfire, especially later on internet forums like 4chan and Reddit. It was an intellectual prank that kind of took on a life of its own.
So let me get this straight. We go from a small, actual historical group in Bavaria to 18th century anti-revolutionary propaganda to a 1960s counterculture prank. And that's how Illuminati becomes this catch-all blanket term for basically any shadowy elite group people are suspicious of, even leading to theories about, shape-shifting lizard people. That's quite a journey.
It really is an incredible evolution. The term just keeps morphing to fit modern anxieties. Now, it often includes powerful figures like bankers and industrialists or politicians. They perceive secrecy of real groups, like the Bilderberg Group. They meet privately, don't publish minutes, that gets cited by conspiracy theorists as proof. Proof that this kind of shadowy elite exists and operates above Obama, Cameron, and Putin, secretly trying to establish a new world order. It taps into that very deep, very human suspicion of hidden power structures.
Okay, so after diving through all this history, myth, propaganda, and even deliberate pranks, what does this journey into the Illuminati really mean for you, the listener? What's the big takeaway here?
I think the biggest takeaway has to be the absolute importance of critical thinking. Especially now, right? In a world just saturated with information and misinformation. The story of the Illuminati is such a powerful example of how a real historical group, whether you think they were well-intentioned or misguided, can be twisted and transformed over centuries into this pervasive belief system that genuinely shapes how people see the world. It really highlights our human desire for clear explanations, especially when things feel chaotic or out of control. Combine that with a natural distrust of power, and you get these complex narratives that can feel compelling, even if they're, lacking in hard facts and solid research.
It is almost poetic, isn't it?
Yeah.
A group that was originally founded to fight superstition and prejudice ends up becoming a central figure in modern superstitions and prejudices.
Yeah, exactly. The irony is pretty stark, and maybe this leaves us with a final question for you to think about. The original Bavarian Illuminati, they envisioned this universal republic, Right. An enlightened elite guiding humanity towards a new world order of happiness and freedom. Now, in our world, we often say we value transparency, right? Yet global events remain incredibly complex, often opaque. So do you think the spirit of the Illuminati, maybe not the actual group, but the underlying ideas, whether it's their initial ideals for a supposedly better world, or maybe the methods of concealment and manipulation they employed, could that spirit still exist somehow? Just maybe, much more subterranean than most people would ever think.